Hey, it's Ignacio from Bags. Welcome to the CashPod, your go-to guide for building bigger, better cash flowing businesses. We appreciate you tuning in as we break down everything growth, from mastering business finances to securing capital and scaling without burning yourself out. In this episode of the CashPod, we're going to be talking about how to build a product, hopefully a really good one. Join us in this conversation on when to do more, when to do less, a general framework for building a product, creating moments of magic, finding your users, and a little bit more. Let's dive in.
Hey, hi everyone. We're excited to be back on the pod. It's been a couple weeks, but today we have Ignacio on the mic for his one-on-one. But we're just going to talk about product. Ignacio is the head of product at Bags. Is that your title? He's a co-founder, but also does all the product stuff, and that's a big part of our business. So thought it might be cool to pick your brain on how you build and what it inspires you and where you have some advice for other people listening that have their own fintech product of sorts or even just building a business and knowing when to scale back or add or whatever advice you have. But I wanted to start out with hearing more about your background in product and what got you started and into it. And
Background in product's an interesting question because I think it's like one of those weird careers like product management, where it's very clear once you're in it, but it's not super clear how to get into product or product management. And I think that the role in itself is evolving quite a bit right now, especially with like how people are building now that they couldn't build before. And I think for me, it was definitely a non-conventional path. Left school with the idea that I wanted to work in tech, but it was really hard because I was uh, an international student in the US and I had some requirements for visa, so it kind of limited what I could do. But I was lucky enough that in the place where I worked originally, I had a lot of contact with engineers and engineering teams, and there was a product management function within a marketing agency. So I kind of like started dipping my feet, and honestly, I think like the biggest thing I learned there is just like making yourself available and helpful, and like providing value up front, no matter like what it is. Just like absorb as much information as possible. Was helpful, and that was like a nice little confirmation of like I'm not just someone that enjoys technology and like enjoys the novelty of it as a user, but actually enjoys the building process and enjoys like what's going on behind the scenes and the more technical aspect too. From there, I left the US to go work in the UK. I worked for a small startup doing, again, anything I could do to get closer to tech. I started doing sales, then I did data and analytics, working super closely with the product team and kind of like upskilling personally on a technical level, which opened doors at Monzo, which is where I spent most of my career. So I worked there as an analyst, working in operations, data, managed to work my way into having an internal product squad of my own, which was an awesome experience. We looked at data products, we looked at internal products, and at that point we were like around 2,000 employees. So everything we built wasn't for a small user base; it was for 2,000 customers that were just like there by default. And it was an amazing experience. Learned a ton, and just kind of stayed on that path. And it's really what's led me to collaborate with Luke and our platform team at Bags to build what we have today.
can you, just for anyone who's listening that's maybe new to the pod, could you explain like your role at Bags a bit more and then maybe a quick overview of the Bags platform itself?
So my role at Bags is technically I look after product and operations because we think that how we provide our service and how we provide our product is actually like two sides of the same coin. And a lot of the building that we do is actually for our internal team to work better and faster and more efficiently. But that's kind of a secondary thing. I think one of my friends and mentors in life, he used to describe product management as like being the janitor at school. It's basically like cleaning up any mess that gets in the way of the actual work being done. And I think that's true for like 80% of my time and what I do, which is just like figure out what the biggest blockers are, what the biggest problems are, and clear them out of the way as effectively as possible. I think that's like probably my primary responsibility is like help others do their work better, do the best work they've ever done. And then the 20% that maybe precedes that is really around um, figuring out what the right solution is and how we get to building it, which is, I think, a really cool exercise in questioning, who who is your customer really? And I know that sounds like a kind of a facetious or oversimplified question, but it's just like understanding who you're talking to on the other side of the screen, especially with software. You rarely get to meet your customers in person, what they really care about, what their main pain points are, how they prioritize their pain points versus what's available to you as solutions and how those things can match. And then getting really tactical on like how best to roll out those solutions in order to optimize for the right pain points, but also make it make sense, right? As a story or as a cohesive experience. So that 20% is pretty deep thinking and investigation and like learning and stealing and swiping like an artist. But the other side, and Steal Like an Artist, great book, by the way, recommend it highly. The other side is really just like getting things out of the way so that everyone else who's either providing the service or building the product or helping our customers succeed can do it in the easiest way possible. That's my rollout bags, I think, to summarize it. And what we built is a financial growth platform, is what we call it. But basically, it's a space where business owners can better understand their financials for their business, get their books every month, and get connected to funding opportunities so that they can grow the business. That's the high level. At the technical level, there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. We AI insights in there. We have API connections to the best accounting software. We have kind of like the standard architecture and infrastructure you want from a best in class software, period. So we're bringing kind of like best in class software development practices into something that I think is pretty old school, which is accounting. And that's, yeah, that's the highlight of what we're building at Bags.
It's so detailed. Like there's so many nooks and crannies in the Bags platform, but it's also very easy to use and understand. So shameless plug out of the way. But no, actually, I think it's important to talk about the product itself. But okay, thank you for the background. I feel like we're set up for success now for my next questions because I really want to like dive into. I don't have any experience with product, period. I've never built a product, especially software. So I'm curious, like, kind of like picking your brain on what makes a good product and how to build a really good product in a market that's kind of like oversaturated, you could say a little bit. Not oversaturated, but there's a lot of software and products and technology out there. So how to be different, how to understand your user, all that stuff. But speaking on the user and the market, like you mentioned, how important do you think it is to understand your user and like what's one way to do it well? Like if you're just starting and you're like, okay, how do I find my market? Big question. So
Yeah, there's like four or five wrapped in there, but like I would kind of just like throw it back to be like, okay, Samia, what's the coolest, most memorable product you've used in the last 3 to 6 months at all? Just like products in general, like in your life,
anything, a
something that
product
you
in
were
general,
like, hey, everyone, you need to hear about this, buy it, use it.
my
I know
hatch
this
alarm.
because you mention it a lot. Yeah,
I
the hatch
do.
alarm.
I knew you were setting me up for that. Yeah, that. But I don't even think that, okay, it's good, but it's also like, I don't think you need it. Like that wouldn't be like my like top thing. But yeah, we can talk about Hatch.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about hatch.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what makes it magical, what makes it cool. Why did you spend a disproportionate amount of money on an alarm?
No, I know. I feel like I like have like I'm like, wait, why did I do that? No. So it's an alarm clock, everyone, if you haven't heard about it. It basically like wakes you up. It's like a physical alarm clock, but the best part about it, actually, this is very, very interesting. I actually originally got the Philips alarm clock because I was like, oh, it's like a little bit cheaper, like it's probably the same thing. I tested it out and it was like really hard to use. It was just the physical alarm clock. It was really hard to use. It was like funky. It was gigantic. I mean, it was like the size of my head. And it was just confusing. Like it's an alarm clock. Wow, how is it confusing? I've used these my whole like childhood. So I returned it and I was like, let me just give the Hatch a go. Like it's a little bit more expensive, but really like in the grand scheme, I don't like fine. I need to get my sleep in order. So the thing that made it different and better is it's app operated. So you connect your alarm clock to an app and you can control everything from your phone. And then there's just like a lot more options and it's just more easy to use, but also like there's just a lot more opportunity to make your life easier. The Philips alarm clock, it was you can only set two alarms. For Hatch, you can have a million alarms, and then it's any different sound you want to wake up to, any different light setting. And then there's like, unwind. You can unwind with it. You can do white noise, brown noise. Like it's just very fun to use. It feels like a little community. That's what I got excited about. And it just looks better too, I think, visually.
Cool. Just like
Very
this
passionate.
quick side note. Yes, very passionate. But maybe if I was going to re-ask that quick side note, like I'm going to try a second version of that question. You could choose whatever results better. But it's like, okay, well, how would you like describe the hatch to a friend if, yeah, like passing on the street, they're like, hey,
Mm,
I hate waking up with my iPhone.
yeah.
Like, what is the experience that you would describe to them about the hatch? Like, like, how do you not sell it, but like, how do you recommend something
I would just be
without
like,
feel like you're selling it as an actual salesperson?
I saw I when I'm passionate about some product, I sound like a salesperson. Like I'm like, no, you need to get it. No, but I would just be like, okay, like I had a hard time waking up. Like I would set alarms for like 6 a.m. and snooze for like an hour and a half to 2 hours. So, I would just feel like it helps you wake up in the morning because it eases you into it. It's not startling like alarm noises. You do everything from your phone. It's also like not on your phone, so you don't have to like look at your phone first thing in the morning, which is kind of nice.
I think the first thing that was super cool about that second answer that you gave is here's the problem that I had, right?
Yeah.
Like I am not a morning person and I wake up and it takes me 10 alarms to wake up and this thing solves it for me. Also, on top of that, it's like really wonderful because you unwind and you feel XYZ and it's really
Yeah.
beautiful and it's smart and it's simple, not like this clunky other one that I had before. And I think like there's a lot to extrapolate in terms of like kind of throwing it back to your questions on like, okay, how do you develop an awesome product? And I think the only way that you see it is like kind of scrape away the marketing fluff from the products that we love and really go towards just like two things fundamentally for me is like first is the design problem, right? Like is it solving what is it solving for? And the second piece is what is the experience around it? Right? And I think that's like if you start with the problem, that's I think going to help you start to niche down your customer, right? So someone that is up and at it at 4 a.m. normally without any need for an alarm is not going to be the right customer for this brand. Like they should never advertise to them. They're never going to buy a super expensive alarm clock. But someone that wants to have a more pleasant experience in a space that they hate and like get that aggregate value is going to be an amazing client like you, right? Like I don't like waking up. And so I think like starting with a problem is something that we've done, I think, generally as bags. We started with it is really difficult to get access to capital, even as a successful business. That was kind of our core problem. But then we take it into the micro on a week to week basis. Whenever we have an idea, we always check like what problem is this solving, right? And like how are you thinking about the core problem? Like, is the problem clear enough? Is it quantifiable? Is it specific enough? And I think like no matter what, there's going to be a deep correlation between the quality of your solutions and the quality of or the clarity of your problems, which is how we think about it at Bags. And that's not me. It's, I think, it's pretty widespread in the canon of building good tech products. But then the other piece I think is the experience, right? And this part is kind of like twofold. One is like table stakes and good enough. So I think there maybe even three, I would think about it in three ways. It's like figuring out what part of your experience. Okay, so like I have a clear problem, I have a clear user, or as clear a user as I can get right now. That's always going to be refined over time. But then there's like three parts of the experience. What is like what is good enough? And being super clear with yourself on like what parts of your product just have to be good enough. So for example, with the alarm clock, the parts of the product that just need to be good enough are probably the materials. Like, you don't care if your alarm clock, and probably you prefer that your alarm clock is not like space grade titanium. Not important. It can be plastic and it could still get the job done. That's not the so figure out what has to be good enough, but define very clearly what good enough is, right? Like you don't want the cheapest plastic out there. You have like nice, heavy feeling kind of, for lack of a better word, sexy plastic, but not titanium. Then you have to figure out like, hey, what are the one, two, maybe top three things that I have to be world class at? And I think in the case of again this alarm clock, it's probably the one, maybe the aesthetic design of it, two, the actual sensorial experience around it, right? So like the lights, the sounds, like how do we replicate things that are scientifically backed? Cool. And then the third piece is moments of magic, right? So what's good enough? What am I world class at? Just one or two, maybe three things. And then how can I plug in moments of magic? Because I think the thing that if you kind of line up now those five things, so problem, really niche down user, and those three kind of core sets of how to figure out the implementation of the solution, you actually end up with something amazing because you're very clear on where you want to spend the most of your effort, which is the world-class things. you're very aware and like in tune with your customers' needs, which is where you like plug in moments of magic. And moments of magic are these like small things that have a disproportionate effect. Right. So I don't really know how the alarm clock might work. But if, for example, yeah, go ahead.
The cookies, I think we've made this example, like the cookies at Hilton or whatever, there's like basically you just check in and they give you a cookie. And it's
Yes,
like
yes, yes,
and
yes,
it's
yes.
like
Like a
it's
warm
like
chocolate chip cookie.
I think it's like Hilton or Marriott or something, I don't know. But every time I go, all right, I literally cannot wait for this probably 20-cent cookie that they have millions of.
I love
But
that. That's
it's
the
it's a
perfect
thing.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's a
that's a
whole
moment
thing.
of magic. And like if you're seeing like two hotels, one beside the other, and then like even like call it a $10 or $20 difference per night, you're still gonna go for the one that gave you that moment of magic because it's
Yes.
special, right? So I think having that absolute clarity and being very deliberate in like when you invest time into plugging in moments of magic or not. And I think like even if we're talking about retail or CPG products, that's super interesting to me because where I see that happen a lot is actually the packaging, right? Like the typical example is like the Apple packaging of like you have your iPhone, and I think if you interview like 10 millennials, nine of them will have kept their iPhone boxes. And no one knows why. But it's because there's like a magical experience of like the box kind of like dropping slowly and then like revealing the iPhone and giving you that like psychological satisfaction, right? No change of cost, just like a little bit of a thought process around what could make that moment, that experience magical. And I think you can do that all the time, right? Like even if you're selling t-shirts. I saw a kid on TikTok or Instagram or something, and I'm sorry if he's not a kid and is actually an adult now, but looked very young, so it's a compliment. But he was selling t-shirts and then he would can the t-shirts. That was his packaging. And the cans were like really beautifully designed and super creative and all that stuff, but it's just like the t-shirt was just a t-shirt. And the
Right.
designs of the t-shirts were not the standout thing, but the moment of magic was like you literally like pop the can like a tennis lid,
No,
and then you
it's
pulled out your
exciting.
t-shirt. Yeah, exactly. So I think there's
Um,
a ton of ways to do that. And I think if you, to summarize it and line it up, if you start with a very specific problem, you anchor to an even more niche down customer, you figure out what's good enough and just kind of like take it from there so that you could focus your efforts on what you're world class at and then just like sprinkle on some moments of magic. I think you have a
yeah,
pretty good framework for product development.
pretty spot on. There's the episode, guys. No, I'm kidding. It is kind of that simple. You know what I mean? Building a product is it doesn't have to be this overcomplicated thing. Like you kind of just solve a problem and then make it good in places that matter, and then don't focus on the stuff that kind of maybe isn't serving you. Sometimes I feel like products, tech, CPG, any sort of product, sometimes businesses or companies in general like stray away from their original, their like core values, their core mission. And it's easy to do that because we're always trying to solve more problems and trying to hit every single target market and all that stuff. But like when do you know to add on and then when do you know to all right, let's just strip it down. Let's keep it how it is. Is there a healthy balance between the two?
That's a really good question. And I think that's a discussion we have like internally on the engineering side a lot is just like when do you add a new feature and when do you improve the things that are already there? I think there's two. So I'm gonna start like one thing I really liked about your question was just like this constantly solving more problems. And I think like what I would try and do is classify whether your problems are like so an analogy I really like is the video game analogy, right? Like there's a core mission that you're on, right? As you're working through whatever your mission is, which is like in I think yeah, Super Mario, right? Mario's mission is get to the flag at the end of the level. That's the only thing that matters. As he's going through the like jumps and dips and dives, he can go into sub-levels and side quests. And so the question I would ask myself is like, is this a challenge that's part of my mission, or is this just a side quest? And a side quest could be a distraction or it could be productive, but it's always going to be a gamble. Whereas like the core mission is like, or the core problem you're solving is always going to be a little bit more stable in terms of like what you can expect from solving the next problem. That's to me where it gets really interesting because if you can start differentiating whether the new problems that you're tackling are actually kind of like sprouting new threads or new missions, or they're just the next level of the same mission that you're on. I think you can start to make better informed decisions on like whether you want to tackle it. And I don't think there's a right answer on which one you choose at what point in time. There's a ton of the, like go to the data, figure that out. But being deliberate about which path you're going down is to me fundamental. It's simple. It's not easy. And I think simple, I think you said before, like building a great product is simple, but it's not easy. Making these kinds of decisions and even differentiating them is simple, but it's not easy. So I think figuring that out and figuring out whether the problem that you're tackling is a problem that you've earned or a problem that you're making is also a cool abstraction to think of it from. Is like, for example, at the beginning, I'm not selling enough. Good problem, earned problem, because now you've built the product, now you're not selling enough. Great. Once you start selling enough, maybe you start losing customers. Earned problem. You wouldn't be losing those customers if you didn't have them in the first place. But maybe in that course of it's like, I don't have 5 SKUs for the same product. That's not an earned problem. That's a made up problem. And sometimes made up problems are good because they come from intuition and that kind of entrepreneurial or creative sense that I think a lot of people have. That's the first piece. So there's a framework that we love internally, which is I think like maybe taken from Navy SEALs or something. It's the KISS framework, KISS, which is keep it simple, stupid, as much as possible. I think we default to simplicity and we default to taking away and simplifying over adding. And I think there's something to be said about higher quality over higher volume of what you're providing. I think just the experience is easier to grasp. The experience is easier to take advantage of. And I think once you have like a lot of validation that there's another real problem and that real problem is an earned problem that kind of like takes your platform or product or whatever to the next level, then I would add it, but not then. And I think like there's companies that just get on and grow really well by doing nothing more than they have for a long time. Like I think Birkenstock is an amazing example. I think it's like a 19th century company. They've been making the same sandal at its core for centuries. And then after centuries of being successful on a sandal, they introduced the rubber version of the exact same sandal, right? Like it's like I think that's to me just like so beautifully elegant in terms of a product development cycle.
They had the simplest form of entrepreneurial journey you can have,
It's
and it's kind of
amazing.
amazing.
It's amazing. And I think what they do is like, but I don't think they've ever stopped is iterating on the first product, right? It's like, okay, how do we make the straps a little bit more robust? How do we like change the buckles so that they last longer and look nicer? What materials can we bring in that like make it feel a little bit more premium? Or how does now they have like 3 versions of the footbed. Why? Right? Like there's an orthopedic component, there's a utility component, there's a comfort component, but it's the same core product. And I think not everyone obviously can get away with that for that long, but I think the principle is still really cool. And I think it goes to show that there's so much value in doing fewer things better because it's hard to get to that quality on anything, especially when you have multiple things rolling at once. But also one just like kind of reminder for myself as well is just as you add more things, the complexity doesn't increase linear. It increases exponentially, right? Because it becomes like multiple things tying to each other as opposed to stacking on top of each other.
Thank you. We will catch you next time. Bye.